For the first time, my name is Reverend Angela Denton, and again, I welcome you. Today's talk is entitled Grieving with Others, a Sacred Act of Love. Now, normally during our service, I begin with meditation and the talk follows. Today, I'm just switching things up a bit, and I'm starting with the talk, and then we will end with meditation. And so grief is a heavy topic. It's a heavy experience. So as we begin, let us just take that deep breath. As we open ourselves to be vulnerable, to be moved, to be touched, and to be transformed by grief. So during the past year, the magnitude of the grief that we have experienced here in the United States and all around the world has been unprecedented. Here in the United States alone, approximately 540,000 individuals have lost their lives due to COVID-19. And out of that astronomical number, approximately 7,300 individuals made their transition from COVID in this last week alone. Additionally, hate crime, murders, and deaths due to police brutality have increased over the past 3 years. And many in our community have lost a loved one, have had that personal experience of losing a loved one to COVID-19. And then we've had many individuals lose a loved one due to other illnesses. And then all of us can relate to the loss of the way of life as we knew it. And therefore, many are walking around with a heavy load of grief. And what is in one is in the whole, and what is in the whole is in the one. That is the law of oneness. So on some level, each one of us have experienced grief this year, whether we are aware of it or whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And we can see that truth of the heavy load of grief in the statistics, in the numbers, the also unprecedented amount of people who are experiencing stress and depression and addiction rates are all at an all-time high. So now more than ever, we need to embrace, learn how to be present with grief, our grief and the grief of others. And we could see that being supported throughout Scripture, the importance of grieving and the importance of grieving with one another. And so this morning, I'll just share 3 of those passages. We see in Romans, Paul states, knowing our oneness, knowing the power of community, the power of being present to one another, he states, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And then in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus presents the Beatitudes. That is the series that we did. If you were with this community in the fall, we did the series on the Beatitudes. And one of the most precious Beatitudes is, blessed are they, those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And then we see in John, in the Gospel of John, Jesus's friend Lazarus, which occurs, he had made his transition. And this occurs chronologically in the Gospel right before Palm Sunday. And so Jesus is summoned to go to be with the family. And as he gets there, he sees the people weeping. When Jesus saw her being Mary, Mary is one of Lazarus' sisters, weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And as we go to line 35 in John 11, we see it says simply a statement, and Jesus wept with them. So, although scripture and many other religious texts are filled with the imparting the wisdom of how important it is to grieve, to be present to our grief, to be present to the grief of others, there really isn't any how to be present to grief. There really isn't a roadmap or much discussed as far as the process of being present. Which brings us to today's lesson, grieving with others, a sacred act of revolutionary love. And today I continue the series that we started just a few weeks ago based on the book See No Stranger, a memoir and a manifesto to revolutionary love written by Valerie Kaur. And in the book, she delineates how to be active with our love, that love is more than a passive sentiment. And she speaks of the power of oneness. And she divides her lessons throughout the book, being called to be a revolutionary love, into 3 sections. How to be a revolutionary love for others, for our opponents, those who we find it hard to love or see the divinity in, and love of ourselves. And there is her compass of all of the lessons that lead in each one of the subcategories. And last week we began loving others by opening the door to wonder. Wonder. As we move through the day, I invited you to affirm, brother, sister, sibling, you are part of me I do not yet know. And if we found a judgment arising or a fear about another arising, to affirm that statement, brother, sister, sibling, you are a part of me I do not yet know. See, sometimes when we're struggling to see the divinity, it's hard to leap to that embodying the full divinity of our love at its greatest and highest. And so she invites us to begin to wonder as we begin to ask, well, I wonder what your needs are, what makes you hurt, what makes you suffer. And so now today, learning how to love others, we focus on how do we grieve with others? Now, I know we say, well, in order to love ourselves, to love another, we have to love ourselves. In order to grieve with somebody else, we have to know how to grieve ourselves. Because we're all one, we know we get to do it all together. And we know when we need to take a time out, but nevertheless, what we do for another, we do for ourselves. And so whatever we explore here this morning, know that it also applies to how to be present to your own grief as well. And I share with you very powerful statements or definition of how Valerie describes grieving. And she shares, grieving is the practice of feeling the pain of loss. Grief is the price of love. We grieve what we have loved. Loving someone means that one day there will be grieving. They will leave you, or you will leave them. The more you love, the more you will grieve in this lifetime. How often in society have we been taught the other? That if we grieve too long, feel things too deeply, that we're not strong. What a profound truth to really acknowledge. The more you love, the more you will grieve in this lifetime, the more you will say yes to opening your heart. And she continues, loving someone also means grieving with them. It means letting their pain and loss bleed into our own heart. And when you see that pain coming, you may want to put up the guardrail, sound the alarms, raise the flag. But you must keep the borders of your heart porous when you love someone. All too often, because we only know how to model how to grieve or not to grieve by our loved ones, our culture, and our society. And one of the ways we've learned to deal with it is to completely suppress it. And then lastly, she shares, there's no fixing grief. There's only carrying it and helping one another carry it. You see, grieving is not something we just survive and overcome. It's an ongoing journey. It's an act of transformation. And when we are brave with our grief, it deepens our understanding of the world and ourself, and it deepens our capacity to love. So I know in this short amount of time that I have with you this morning, there's no way I could possibly cover all of the presence and the practice of grieving. But I would like to share a bit that I believe would be very helpful in a way that will move us past maybe the unhelpful ways or the ways we have ignored it. And so I'd like to share a video with you. It's a short video, and it's very powerful, explaining the healthy way we can be present to grief with another and even ourselves, and ways that maybe we've learned that are not so helpful. Now I'm going to start it off, and it seems to always default to the Arabic setting for the subtitle. So I'm just going to take a minute to fix that.
So what do we do about all the pain we see in the world? All the pain we feel in our own lives? And why does it seem like our best efforts to help somebody feel better always backfire? I've been studying intense grief and loss, baby death, violent crimes, accidents, suicides, and natural disasters. And I've learned something really interesting. Cheering people up, telling them to be strong and persevere, helping them move on, it doesn't actually work. It's kind of a puzzle. It seems counterintuitive, but the way to help someone feel better is to let them be in pain. This is true for those giant losses and the ordinary, everyday ones. Educator Parker Palmer writes, "The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, exactly as it is." He's talking about acknowledgement here. Acknowledgement is this really amazing multi-tool. It makes things better even when they can't be made right. For example, somebody's struggling. Their baby died, or there's been a bad accident, or their mom got sick, and they're just sad. It's way more helpful to join them in their pain than it is to cheer them up. But here's what we tend to do instead. You have 2 other children, you need to find joy in them. Or, you know what you need? You just need to go out dancing and shake it off. Or, I felt really sad once. Did you try acupuncture? We're not really sure what to do with someone's pain, so we do what we've been taught. We look on the bright side. We try to make people feel better. We give them advice. It's not like this is nefarious. I mean, we try to cheer people up because we think that's our job. We're not supposed to let people stay sad. The problem is, You can't heal somebody's pain by trying to take it away from them. Now, acknowledgement does something different. When a giant hole opens up in someone's life, it's actually much more supportive to acknowledge that hole and let pain exist. It's actually a radical act to let things hurt. It goes against what we've been taught. In order to really support you, I have to acknowledge that things really are as bad as they feel to you. If I try to cheer you up, you end up defending yourself and your feelings. If I give you advice, you feel misunderstood instead of supported. And I don't get what I want either because I wanted you to feel better. It's pretty rare that you could actually talk somebody out of their pain. Rarely does the admonishment to look on the bright side actually heal things for someone. It just makes them stop telling you about their pain. It's so tempting to try to make things better. When somebody shares something painful, it's much more helpful to say, "I'm sorry that's happening. Do you want to tell me about it?" To be able to say, "This hurts," without being talked out of it, that's what helps. Being heard helps. It seems too simple to be of use, but acknowledgement can be the best medicine we have. It makes things better, even when they can't be made right.
So before I begin, just reviewing some really incredibly helpful things about how it is not supportive to the grieving process and then what is healthy to the grieving process. In the chat box, write yes or type in yes if you have either yourself participated in trying to fix or suppress. You were either the recipient of someone trying to fix you or you trying to take away the grief of another, quote unquote. If you experienced that, just type yes. So I can relate to being on both ends at some point in my life with that. And I believe this is not about finding fault with yourself or with someone other or admonishing anybody, but it's about raising awareness. Raising awareness. So there's two unhealthy ways in dealing with grief, with our own grief or being present to another. And I put them in the two categories of the fixers, where we try to fix it, or the suppressors. So when we are trying to be fixers, now, mind you, out of our truest desire to be kind to somebody, we do what we have been taught. So I know that there's nothing, as they say in the video, nefarious here. So the fixers, that would fall into the category where people try to cheer you up. They may say things like, for example, when I was interacting with a few people 3 weeks after my father had died, and someone asked, "So how are you doing?" And I said, "Okay." And, the individual knew that my dad, again, there's no blame or shame here. I'm just speaking to my experience. And it also impacted me now and going forward. And I said, "Okay." And then the response was, "Just okay, just okay." And I felt like anger. I felt like being really angry. And I'm like, "Yes, I'm just okay." I said, "I'm still grieving my dad. He only passed 3 weeks ago." And I, knew I could say this to the individual. Or sometimes people say, "Oh, you know what? It makes me so sad to see you unhappy or see you so sad." So now I'm not saying that we don't share feelings, but then it's like, okay, now I have to process my own grief. And now do I have to feel like guilty because you're sad? Or do I have to carry is it my job now to make you feel happy because you're not happy that I'm not happy. And so we could see how that doesn't help. Or we tell people to be strong, persevere. And what I would like to acknowledge about our power of strength, our ability to be vulnerable, to be open and to allow all the feelings to rise, to experience grief at its fullest is really what it means to be strong, not to toughen up and just like get through it. Or come on, let's go dancing. Why don't you try some acupuncture? Now, although some of these may be helpful, unless somebody asks you, that's a different story. But in our love of people, sometimes, it's like, okay, let me pull out my prescription, okay, go dancing, go get acupuncture, go to a meeting, go to whatever. If it's not asked for your, advice, then it's about being, again, present. Or we get sometimes, oh, your dad was around for 86 years. You should be thankful. My mom passed when she was 32. Take a deep breath. Yes, there is a blessing to having a parent or loved one live well into their older years. But even when they pass in their older years, does not mean you do not experience the pain of grief or sadness. Or to change the subject, look at how many things you have to be grateful for. Yes, our lives are filled always with blessings, but we must allow each other to be present to the pain and to the grief that is. Then we have the categories of the the category of unhealthy way of dealing with grief is to suppress, where people who may know that you've had a loss in your life do not even acknowledge it. They may even avoid contact. There may be some judgment. It's been like 6 or 8 months, maybe a year. This person is still sad. Like, hey, I don't want to be around them anymore. Or their first interactions, or the only way you know how to interact when you are present with them, is to discuss your commitments and your obligations, how many sick days or bereavement days you have, and so on and so on. Several years ago, when I was still teaching in public school, there were certain things that you were not allowed to use personal days for. When we were going to have a holiday break, you can't use them before then. Or if we were going to have parent-teacher conferences, then you had to have some kind of note or something. So one of my dear friends, her nephew had committed suicide, so she went to be with the family in Florida. And upon her return, what she got in her mailbox was not a bereavement card, not a phone call of condolences and being loving and supportive. What she got was a letter from the superintendent asking her to show proof of her nephew's death. Yeah, sometimes that happens. We breathe into that. Or sometimes in the suppression of not wanting to deal with grief, our own or with another, we try to tell people to get on, move on with your lives, keep busy, get things done. Because if I'm busy, if you're busy, then we just don't have to go into that space. We could just push it down a little bit. So there are some healthy ways in which we can be present to grief, to allow it to open our hearts, to allow it to transform us. And I love this quote that was shared in that video by Parker Palmer. The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. My friends, that's what it means to hold sacred space. Part of the chaplain training for those who've gone through the chaplain training at Unity by the Shore is about listening, being present, holding sacred space, holding a heart open, holding the knowing of their divinity, allowing to feel and to be moved by people and not having to fix them or suggest things. And that's what we are being called to be present to our own grief and to the grief of others. So we allow the pain to be present for someone. And then we have the courage, we have the courage and the bravery to allow our own pain to arise. See, because sometimes when we do a lot of talking, do a lot of fixing, what's really up is, I don't want to tap into that place in me. What is in one is in the whole. What is in the whole is in the one. And if I'm really honest, if I allow that to happen, then I have to feel it too. We acknowledge, we validate. And I've learned, instead of asking when I call my mother, it's just a habit. How are you doing today? I don't start my conversation with that. I'm like, Mom, I'm just calling to let you know I love you. What's going on today? And sometimes she'll tell me that, I see her quite frequently throughout the week, but she'll say, oh, I'm talking to your dad, she goes in front of the urn, and I just listen and so I'll sometimes say, and so, and how does that feel? Or, and I'm like, wow, acknowledging how lost she may feel. And it's a lesson for me and it's a lesson for her. And sometimes I just hug her and I'm just there. Even when she tells me she's a burden, she's this and she's that. And I used to want to teach her, no, you're not a burden. And now I just say, I just simply am present and I just love her. It's helpful to listen to their story. Tell them about a fond memory, something that they wish they might have done if that space is open. And you'll know that space. If the person feels that there is that opening and a trust and that you are witnessing with them, you will open that opportunity. And so we are to be present, to feel, and to breathe. I always talk about how the power of the breath to greet every emotion, to greet every thought and every experience, because it can get very intense. And sometimes the only thing that is the most powerful to be is to just be in the stillness, no conversation with someone. And so that brings us to always a call to the practice. I invite you into a practice which Valerie outlines in her book, and I kind of broke it up into 3 sections, 3 ways of practicing grieving. What I love about this is it really, like I said last week, dovetails to, we just finished Living Originally series where everything was about radical awareness, being present, to breathe into it all. And she invites us into that as well. So the practice of grieving on our own for our own self, where we go into a time of meditation. We call up a loss, something that is aching within our heart, whatever that may be. We allow it to surface. Notice where we feel it in our body. Notice what feelings arise. Sadness, loneliness, anger, regret, remorse, so on and so on. And we just allow our breath to meet it, to be fully opened with our hearts open. Maybe there are some thoughts that arise. And then we breathe into that. And then we can ask, if we are willing, what act of love am I willing to engage in right now for myself? What act of love am I willing to engage in? Also, journaling is important, in knowing that there are always professionals to help us with being present with our grief. So the practice of grieving with others, I just shared what was not helpful and what was helpful. So that applies here. But maybe there's someone has lost someone significant. Reach out to them. Practice those things that I've shared about allowing, being present, breathing into it, asking them to share a fond memory, beginning the call with, I'm here because I'm thinking of you and you are so near and dear. And ask them, how is there anything I can do to support you? Then I share the practice of healing our collective grief. There is a pain body that exists in the sacred soul of the world, of every nation, of our lives. You know how we talk about we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and we stand on them in their greatness, and we also still have the reverberation, the vibration in the pain body of unhealed hurts of this nation that we have not dealt with. All too often we see in the news, just recently, there were 6 Asian women. There were 8 people, but 6 Asian women who were brutally murdered just this past week. And so this is an invitation to learn about a group. Maybe you heard of a group that is suffering. And in our history, going back to the plight of the Native Americans and of slavery, and you say, I know all about that. But let me tell you, we have not done a deep healing and a forgiveness level at a deep level in this world. So we can be part of that healing. And part of that is learning more about the plight of a group, taking it into prayer, meditation, sense the loss, experience the loss that reverberates, that vibrates within them and therefore in the collective, and affirm, you are a part of me I do not yet know. And allow whatever feelings to surface and to breathe into them. And then, you get to choose, what act of love am I willing to engage in to be present with these people? And for some, it will be to keep them in prayer, and that is beautiful and that is perfect. But for others, it may be something more. Maybe it will be to attend they had a virtual vigil for the Asian community in Georgia, to be praying with them, support legislation that will help a particular group that is being oppressed, give your resources and gifts. And I just share, I have signed up for Valerie Kaur's Revolutionary Love email. And she sent out an email after the shooting this week. And she said, giving their names. And then she gave the link for the vigil, and then, several different links on how you can be supportive to the Asian community as they heal. Now, again, if this feels right for you, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. You get to choose, but there is her website there. And so now I would like to, again, invite you to the practice of grieving, being present to it, allowing the transformation and the heart opening to the awakening of seeing someone else through the eyes of love, regardless of their differences. And so I'd like to do and to end with a meditation where I invite us to do just that. So as I adjust the music, I invite you to settle in where you are, and as I adjust the music. And so let us take a deep breath together, allowing our breath to be deep and slow. With each breath, we allow a softening and the opening of our hearts. Getting a sense that there is a golden white light hovering above the crown of your head. I invite you to breathe that down. Allow it to fill your heart as you breathe out energy to the front, out the back of your heart. Sense the breath emanating out to the left of your heart chakra and out to the right. And breathing it down to Mother Earth as we form the sacred diamond of divine love, allowing the torsional field of our hearts to open, to expand as we breathe and acknowledge our oneness. Once again, breathing that light back up to our hearts and back up to the crown of our head, and continuing that cycle. Breathing that golden white light down into our hearts, out the front, the back, the left, the right, down and back up to the heart and to the crown. And I invite you to do this a few times in the stillness. Now I invite you to call to mind a memory of a loved one or a loss that you are experiencing in your life. Sense his, her, their presence in your heart. Calling to mind a sacred and beautiful memory. Noticing the feelings that arise within you. And allowing your breath to meet each and every one of those feelings. And now, from your heart, share a message to them. And allow them in their own way to communicate to you. Now call to mind someone you know who has lost a loved one. See them in your heart. Sense their grief. Knowing your own grief, sense their sadness. Sense their joy of loving. And affirm to them, you are a part of me, dear one. You are a part of me, dear one. And when you grieve, I courageously grieve with you. I love you. And I will hold sacred space with you. Allowing whatever sensations to arise within your body. Breathing into all of the feelings. I will hold sacred space with you, my dear one. Now call to mind a group of individuals who may be oppressed or experience hatred in our nation. Hold their grief in your heart and affirm, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. And I am willing to open my heart, for I know grief. And I will hold your grief along with mine in my heart, for you are a part of me. Allow whatever feelings to surface, sensations of your body, and allow your breath to greet them. I will hold sacred space with you. I will hold sacred space. I hold that sacred space in my heart as we grieve together. For you are a part of me. Sister, brother, sibling. And as I heal, you heal. As you heal, I heal. And as our hearts open, let our grief transform our ability to love and to be loved. So let us take that deep breath in and out, breathing in and out deeply, affirming, my heart is open. I courageously love, grieve, and rejoice in times of sorrow and in happiness with my beloved brothers, sisters, siblings. And so it is. Amen. Become aware of your body being supported by your chair, your bed, your recliner. Rub your hands on the tops of your legs. Rub your hands together. It feels right. Stretch and yawn. And when you are ready, open your eyes.